So I remember playing Miss of Pandaria for the first time, and I thought the music was amazing. And I remember also that it made me consider a question that I've never thought of before, but we'll get to that in a minute. The composer Russell Brower talked about how he wanted to use the traditional World of Warcraft music and structure as a base musically, and then build the Chinese aspect on top of that. So it gives you this sense that, yes, you're in a different culture, it's unique, but you're also in a game that takes place in Azeroth. And Russell talked about several key instruments that made it feel Chinese, the first being the eru. Also known as the Chinese fiddle, and it has a very vocal quality to it, like somebody singing with a very strong vibrato at the end. You also have the guzheng, which is like a harp. And we also have the pipa, which is like the Chinese version of the banjo. And while there were a few other instruments that they used to make it sound Chinese, if we were to whittle this list down to one, the one that would make us associate with this culture more than any other, it would be the eru. And we see it in action in the soundtrack, like over here. And I think that's great because it gives us a sense that we're in the same world, because this instrument makes us think of a civilization that actually exists, but also that we're in a completely different part of that same world, more of a fictional, magical one. And that's what music can do to our brains. It brings us back to a culture, one of the longest and oldest major cultures or empires on the planet, the oldest to consistently have written records. Through empires and wars and civilizations coming and going, there has always been the Chinese. So that sense of ancientness, of permanence, is there in the mind when you listen to these types of instruments and you see these images of the ancient Chinese. So this music taps into our brains in ways that other music that attempts to give a sense of ancient wonder in World of Warcraft doesn't. Because there's an actual real culture that we attach to it in our minds. Compare it to another ancient culture in WoW, like the Night Elves. It sounds mystical, but I don't get the sense of an ancient civilization. Something I think more close is the music for the Draenei. Compared to this gorgeous ambient music, the eru doesn't try to sound mystical or ancient. The instrument itself brings us back. And that's the power of the masses being able to associate an entire civilization with one instrument. But we don't have an instrument that we associate with the ancient Romans or the Vikings or so many others, which brings us now to that question that I never thought of asking myself before until I played Miss of Pandaria, because I was able to take this music and compare it to these other fictional races, and I wondered, why do some instruments stand the test of time and make us associate an entire civilization with it just by listening to it? And whatever the answer is, it's so powerful when you combine the experience here of the music with the visuals, because I mean, yes, other cultures in WoW look beautiful, but here I feel transported to these ancient Chinese art pieces that I see when I go to the museum. I just remember pausing for a second sometimes, walking across a bridge and seeing the dragon flying by. The style is so unique that regardless of what you may have thought of the pandas as a race, if it was too silly or goofy of a race to be taken seriously, or if you didn't enjoy the talent tree and other changes at the time of the expansion, I think nearly all of us can agree that the music augmented and was augmented by the beautiful scenery. And I wonder if we could magically record all instances where a player just stood there and looked around to experience the world here, and compared all the different home bases of the different races, where the Wandering Isle would come in that ranking. For me, it would be number one. Now I know I took more of a step back here and analyzed what is it about an instrument that makes us think of an ancient civilization, and I'll probably do a follow-up video where I do talk about more of the particulars in the soundtrack to Miss of Pandaria. But the most interesting thing for me here was that question. Why do you think it is that some instruments make us think of certain civilizations when many other civilizations don't have that same type of an effect with an instrument? And then tying that to why I think the music to Miss of Pandaria had more of an impact psychologically to us than maybe the other expansions, because our minds were able to associate it to something that we know is real, but move around in a more fictionalized, magical version of it. Now, if you'd like access to an extra video, basically what didn't make it to this final cut, consider backing me on Patreon, where for $1 a show, you get access to an extra video for every soundtrack review. And regardless, let me know what you think in the comments below, whether you love the music to Miss of Pandaria or agree with my whole thesis of this music, you know, tying us to this real culture thing and why it's more impactful, or disagree. Either way, let me know. And as always, thank you for watching Soundtrack Reviews, and I'll see you next time.